Okay, thanks a lot. It's great to be back talking to you guys. And most of you, I think, already know me, macmost.com, do my videos and on the site on YouTube and all of that. And for the spring here, what I've been focusing a lot on when I talk to people is cleaning up your Macs because super common problem, it's always been around, is hard drive filling up and then having to deal with not having enough space. How can you clear off more space? Why is so much space being used? That kind of thing. And we've got tools on the Mac to deal with that. And this is a really good time to talk about it because it's never been easier to actually do it using the built-in tools in Mac OS. Before I start showing you places where you could find things to clean out, there are two things you should think about while doing a spring cleaning. Kind of keep in mind the entire time. One is that if your hard drive is almost full, then you've got to plan that the next time you buy a Mac, your next Mac should have a much larger hard drive. It's always a big mistake people make. It's probably the biggest mistake I think people make when purchasing a Mac is getting too small of a drive. Sometimes you'll look, say, at your files now and say, oh, I'm using 700 gigs of space. A 1 terabyte drive should be fine. But if you're keeping your Mac for 5 or 8 years, then probably 1 terabyte is not going to be fine at the end of that time because you're accumulating more stuff, more photos, more videos. Things are getting bigger. 5 years ago, you're probably taking 720 or 1080p video. Now you're taking 4K video. That's standard on the iPhone. Even the photos are getting larger. Projects you're probably working on, like Imovie projects, are probably bigger than they were before. So always think about a bigger hard drive. I always look at where am I at, and what's the logical amount of space I should need now, and then I double it, thinking of how long the Mac is going to last me. And I always say, spend extra money. Any extra money you've got when buying your Mac, always look to getting more drive space. I never have anybody come to me and say, I bought too much drive space on my last Mac. I wish I had bought less. Nobody ever says that. Everybody always complains that they didn't buy enough. So there's that. The second thing is that as you clean stuff up, learn from what you're finding. For instance, one of the things I'm going to show you is your downloads folder. If you find that your downloads folder has tons of stuff in it because you haven't been maintaining it, you haven't been cleaning out old files as you finished with them, then clean them out now, but also learn from that and say, okay, I need to practice keeping my downloads folder clean so this doesn't happen again. So not only make it a process of cleaning your drive now, but also learning from it so that you can clean less frequently in the future. Let me go and share my screen now. All right, so a lot of this stuff you can find. I did a video a while back called Clear Space on Your Mac, which is kind of inspiration for this presentation. Of course, this is a little bit more of a summary of it, but I did actually type up a lot of notes on this page, something I usually don't do. Usually it's just the video and you watch the video, but I include a lot of notes because there's a lot of where to find things. So you can go through this as kind of a checklist of some of the places where you can free up space. Now let's take a look at some of these things. So if I were to do this presentation just a short time ago, like 2-3 years ago, a lot of what I'd be showing you is where to go in the Finder to find different files that could be taking up space. But over the last few years, a built-in system tool has gotten much better at showing you this. It's kind of like this area you can go to that shows you everything where stuff is taking up space. And I call it the storage manager, but it doesn't really have an official name. You get to it by going to About This Mac in the Apple menu. Then you go to Storage, and then you click Manage. And this brings up what I like to call the storage manager. You've got all of these things here on the left that you can select, and I'm going to be using all of these to show you. And so many things that previously you would have done by looking at files and folders and then deleting things, you can now do here in the storage manager, sometimes combining like 10 steps into one step. So to show you my first example here, there's some media apps that are mentioned here on the left side. Like for instance, you've got TV, you've got music, and you've got podcasts, and it shows you how much space each one of those is using. So I don't have much right now on TV, and music's pretty short too, but podcasts is actually really big. It's taking up 7.5 gigs of space. And if you don't listen to many podcasts, or maybe you just do podcasts on your iPhone or something, you might think, okay, this is a problem. Why are 7.5 gigs of space being used for podcasts? Well, you can click here and then you can get a list of your podcasts that you have downloaded. So these are things taking up space. You can sort by name, you can sort by last accessed, and you can sort by size. Now, when you go to the podcast app, you can see all of this as well. You can go to downloaded right here, and you can see all your downloaded podcasts, but you can't really sort easily by size. And then deleting them is kind of a one-by-one thing, remove download there. But here in the storage manager, you can easily sort by size. You can see what's taking up the most space, and you can select and then delete right there. Matter of fact, you can shift click to select a range or command click to select multiple things. So you could easily see that this is taking up a lot of space, go through some stuff here, maybe do a command A to select all, and then delete and clear out podcasts really easily. And the same thing with TV downloads, if you've got rentals, if you've got stuff you purchased, and also for music. Now, the important thing to realize with most of this, especially with podcasts and TV, is you don't need to keep this stuff on your drive. Podcasts are things you can download again. So if there's a podcast episode that's taking up a lot of space and you don't think you're going to be listening to it anytime soon, but you think, I want to keep it around because I may want to listen to this at some point. You don't need to do that. You can actually get rid of the downloads now. You can always go back to that podcast, go back to that episode and re-download it. And the same is true for TV. I see this mistake made a lot where maybe you've purchased a bunch of movies from Apple and you have 20 movies you purchased and you've downloaded them all because you own them and you want to have them on your Mac. But you could re-download them again. You've purchased them, you could go back and get them again. So you don't need to keep any of them on your drive. So by using the manager here, the storage manager, you can quickly go through and clear out a lot of stuff that you don't need. Or maybe learn from it and say, oh, okay, I've got all these podcasts and I don't listen to some of these. Maybe I should go in and unsubscribe from them, delete these, and save some space. And that's a key way to save some space like that. I'm going to take every time I take a sip of coffee, I'm going to be looking at the chat here. Yeah, definitely. Chris mentions that, in podcasts, you don't have to subscribe to you don't have to download every episode when you subscribe, not at all. And that's definitely something. This is my example account, and I've purposely populated this with lots of downloaded podcasts. So you could see right here, but my normal account has no downloaded podcasts. If I want to go and listen to a podcast or watch a movie that I purchased, I download it then on the spot. So let's go to the next thing. And this is a common place where a lot of space is taken up. I see people say, hey, I was looking at what's taking up space on my drive, and it turns out GarageBand is using a lot of space. And the thing about GarageBand is it's an app, but it's also a library of music, loops, and instruments, and all sorts of things. And that takes up a lot of space. And it's hard to get rid of that stuff. In the past, I would have had to show you several folders, some of which don't appear to have anything to do with GarageBand. They're just Apple loops and things to do with Logic, which you may not even have Apple Logic. And you would have to go through and know what files to select and know what to delete to kind of clear out all the GarageBand stuff. After all, GarageBand is a fun app to play with. And a lot of Mac users like to download it, play with it, make some music, but maybe we don't use it professionally. And after playing with it for a bit, now you want that space back. Well, now with this storage manager here, it has this handy little section called music creation. If I select that, there's just a button right there for remove GarageBand sound library. So all those steps that I could have showed you before about how to find and remove GarageBand files that you don't necessarily need if you don't use GarageBand, you can just do it by clicking one button there. And there's actually several other places like that as well. For instance, developer here, it would be difficult in the past to show you the steps to delete things like Xcode caches and stuff if you were a developer. But now you can actually get to them right here, and I can clear out 6.5 gigs of space really easily. And just looking at the questions, what's the likelihood that Apple will no longer maintain a movie? Very unlikely. I don't think it's happened. Like, actually, the opposite has happened. When Apple first started letting you purchase movies, there was I think you downloaded high definition versions of them, and then they upgraded some of those movies to 4K, and you got the 4K versions. Like, they didn't like make you buy a separate version to get 4K, which is something you don't get if you buy a DVD. I have lots of DVDs, and no movie company ever offered to give me the Blu-ray disc because I had bought the DVD. That's kind of nice. All right, so let's look at some other things. There is a section here called iOS files. Now, a common place for storage to be used up is by iPhone and iPad backups. It used to be more common. We used to back up our iPhones and iPads to our Macs. That was like the standard way to do it. That's less and less done now because of iCloud. There's an iCloud backup of your iPhone and iPad. Plus, things like apps are re-downloaded from the App Store. So people buying iPhones and iPads for the first time now don't even know that you could back things up to your Mac. But that, for a lot of us, leaves behind some orphaned backups. A very common thing to have happened is maybe you had to have a succession of iPhones like I have had since the very beginning, and you back them up to your Mac. And at some point you stop doing that and let iCloud do the backup. And you don't notice that a big chunk of space is taken up by these old backups from years ago. And this would have been several steps to actually go in and find those. But right now in the storage manager, you can go to iOS files and it will show you the backups there. So if you find your old iPhone here and an old backup from 2 or 3 years ago, it's easy to see that, delete it right here in the storage manager. If you see Gene has the question, if you see 2 separate files for the iPhone, usually the backup happens at 2 different places. If it is the same device, it's because there's a way to archive a backup, and you can basically say, keep this backup and start backing up a new backup. And you typically don't need the old backup. You only need the current one, the one that's currently being used. Or as I said before, you don't need any backup at all if you're using iCloud backup. All right, so now let's take a look at some places that are not here. So I'm going to hide the storage manager here and bring up the Finder there. And let's look at some places where you could go to find other files. So the library folder is always a suspect for taking up lots of space. And you actually have 2 library folders. So I'm going to use the Go menu, and there's no library folder listed here, but if you hold down the Option key, library appears. And that's my preferred way to get to the library folder. And this is your user library folder. If I command click here, I can see the path. So on my hard drive under users and then my username library. So this isn't the top level library. This is the library just for this one user. And in here, you can find all sorts of files that hopefully don't take up a lot of space, and you shouldn't be touching them. But you may find some things that take up a lot of space. And one way we could do that is if you're in list view, and you can say I am in list view here, so not icon view, but list view. You've got size, and I could sort by size with largest at the top, but folders aren't going to show a size. However, I could use Command J or show view options, and calculate all sizes, this button right here. And what that'll do is it will give me folder sizes. Now, it may actually take a few minutes to generate all the folders, and you'll see like all of the sizes fill in and the order kind of rearrange as it does that. So you wait till it finishes. And then you could see exactly what's taking up a lot of space here. You could find a folder called application support, usually at the top. And this is where applications will save some data. So if you uninstall an app, sometimes it will leave behind data, especially if it's your data. If you've done something with the app and created something and then deleted the app, it may leave behind something in application support here. Usually it won't be too big. Matter of fact, I don't really see an example of anything here that would concern me. I see this one folder called Mobile Sync, and you can tell by the size here and by the name, that's that backup that we were looking at before. So I already had a way to deal with getting rid of iOS backups. But the other things here, you could see names of companies and apps. Here's Adobe, here's Google, Microsoft Edge, here's Zoom, Firefox. So you could tell like this is the folder where Firefox has stored some stuff. Now it's really small, 13 megs, it's tiny. I'm not even concerned about that. But at the top here, since I have everything sorted by size, I can look to see if there's something taking up a lot of space. And if there is, I can get rid of it. Also, I can see, and I would only want to do that if I've uninstalled the app. Here's an example. Microsoft Edge. I installed Microsoft Edge. It's a great little browser. I enjoyed using it, but I was just testing it out. I'm not really using it day to day, and I actually removed it after about a week of playing around with it. But it left behind a folder here that's got a bunch of stuff in it, cache and some settings and things like that. I've uninstalled the app. I don't need it. I could delete this from application support. So that's a good example there. You may find other apps that you've removed, and I would only look at anything that's, particularly large. I mean, 53 megs isn't enough for me to be concerned about. But if this was a gig of stuff that Microsoft Edge left behind after I installed it, then that's a way for you to get back some space. Also, there's another place in here. I'll go back up here to the top, called caches. So this is in the same library folder before, the user library folder. And if I look at caches, I could see, again, names of apps. And sometimes they have this format here, like com.apple.final cut. Sometimes I've got the name of the app, Firefox, like that. Sometimes the name of the company. And this is where caches are stored for apps. So you can look for apps that have left behind some stuff. Here's Microsoft Edge, it's left behind some things. I can delete it. But also, with the size on and sort by size, I'll go into the caches folder and sort by size. I could see that some apps are pretty large. Now, caches, you should be able to delete even if you're still using the app. The app's just going to regenerate them, which is actually a problem because caches are good. Caches speed up your Mac, particularly if they're caches that are downloaded from the internet, like a browser cache. That's actually saying, hey, when I go to this web page, there's a big graphic on it. I'm going to download it once. And every time you visit that web page again, instead of downloading it, I've already got it. So if you clear the cache out, it's going to download it again. So going into a browser cache and then deleting the cache is actually going to slow you down while it rebuilds the cache. So it doesn't actually save you any space. But in fact, this is one of the tricks that all those app cleaners use. You guys know that watch me that I don't recommend using app cleaners or maintenance apps or things you install in your Mac that supposedly speed up your Mac or save you space. One of the things they'll do is they'll find caches and they'll say, hey, I cleared out a whole bunch of space for you. Aren't I great? Aren't I worth the money you spent on me? And it actually just cleared out some cache. It's just going to rebuild the next time you use that app or next time you go to those websites. It actually slowed you down by deleting those caches and didn't save you any space because the space it saved was only temporary. So deleting caches isn't necessarily something you want to do, but it doesn't mean you don't want to look here. For instance, I have an example here of something where I've got an app that I updated. ScreenFlow was what I used to create my videos. I'm using ScreenFlow 10 right now, and it's using a lot of cache space, which is correct because I use it to edit videos, big videos. The cache space is maintained by the app. It's always changing. This big cache here means that if I go into the video that I made yesterday, it will be pretty quick. Everything will be there. I'll be able to scroll through the timeline, do things, because it's cached a lot of its data. But underneath it is a cache from ScreenFlow 9. What happened there? Well, one day I was using ScreenFlow 9 and they came out with ScreenFlow 10. I updated to ScreenFlow 10, but I never ran ScreenFlow 9 again. So it never cleaned up its 1.5 gig cache. Now, it would be nice if ScreenFlow 10 did that for me, but I understand that it didn't. And now if I go in here, I see I can get back space by deleting this because I'm never going to run ScreenFlow 9 again. I don't even have it installed. I'm using ScreenFlow 10. So you can look for things like that here. So let me take a look at some of the questions here. How much of the deleting the deleted app does it clean my Mac do? I don't know because I don't use it. I don't believe in using any of those apps that clean up things for you. Most maintenance that they do, like 99% of the maintenance they do, is stuff your Mac already does or stuff you don't need. Plus, apps running on your Mac like that all the time tend to slow things down and cause trouble. So I don't use them. Using a technique like this is a rarity, seeing ScreenFlow do this. And you know what? I bet you those apps aren't going to catch this either. So yeah, ScreenFlow 9 cache should be gone. I don't know if any of those cleaning apps is going to notice that and try to get rid of it. So there's that. Does Time Machine back up all the caches? Yes, Time Machine backs up. Well, actually, no. I think Time Machine has an exception for caches. I'm not really sure about that. I think it might have an exception for the library caches folder where it doesn't actually back that stuff up. But this technique works whether you're on Intel Macs, M1 Macs. It doesn't really matter. The operating system's the same. I think I've got all the questions here. Scrolling back a bit. If I don't get to your question now, just feel free to ask me at the end again, because I might be covering some of this coming up here. So I'm going to jump back into the storage manager here and look at some other things. Here's one, messages. Messages is another place that people sometimes are shocked to find gigabytes, many gigabytes of space taken up. What happens? Well, you get a message like this, and it's got a video in it. Oh, that actually was a link. Sorry. That's a link, but you get there it is. There's a video attached to a message, an image attached to a message. Somebody sends you a picture, could be 4 megs. If you and your friends are sending pictures back and forth, it could easily add up over the months and years. And you have all of this stuff stored in messages. You can go click the I button here at the top. You can then go scroll down and see the photos for a conversation. You can delete them. It's not a very efficient process to get rid of a lot of those things. But in the storage manager, if you click on messages, it's actually going to show you the message attachments. You can sort by size and you can get rid of them. You also see last access. So instead of sorting by size, if you just have a ton of photos there, you could sort by last access and say, you know what, any image that's older than a few weeks, I'm just going to, shift select to get, everything down to like, 2 weeks ago. And then I can delete those, because if it's an old message and I didn't save the photo by now, I'm probably not going to want to save the photo. So you can clear out space. I've seen people with 10, 20 gigs of space taken up by photos in messages. You also should learn from this too. So if you see this as a problem and, now you clean it out, one thing you can do is try to, come up with a good practice in messages. Somebody sends you a photo, you immediately do something with it. If it's a photo, it's fine, it looks good, you respond, hey, that looks great. Then you don't want the message, then you can, control click on it and delete the image there. and get it out of the stream, out of the conversation. If it is something you want to save, you can drag it to the desktop. You can save it to photos, control click, add to photos library. And if you get into that habit of when you get a photo, do something with it, then you won't find that this doesn't fill up. Maybe it fills up, but much slower, so it doesn't cause as much of a problem. And when you go to clean it out and do your spring cleaning, then it's pretty easy to see that, you know, kind of a dozen photos got through. You can also do a similar thing with other kinds of things. Let's see, photos and iCloud photos. So you've got, here's your photos library. And in your photos library, you've got the ability to turn on or use iCloud Photos. Now, what iCloud Photos does, I'll go to the Photos app. In the Photos app preferences, under iCloud, you can turn on iCloud Photos, and you've got two options. The first option, download originals to this Mac, means that everything on your Mac is the same. You have all your photos all on your Mac. They're all on your local hard drive. Everything is backed up to Time Machine. And the only difference is they're also now on iCloud. So you can now also access them from another Mac or an iPad or an iPhone. However, if you use this option here, Optimize Mac Storage, what'll happen is your recent photos and your frequently accessed photos, they'll all be local, but everything else, the bulk of your collection, will only be on iCloud. You'll still see them here. They would look just like this, except that when you go to access them, it would actually download that from iCloud. And then you would get the full resolution version. So if you have a decent connection, you may not even notice the difference between Download Originals and Optimize Mac Storage. But the difference is that on your Mac, your photos library takes up a lot less space. And it won't happen right away. So if you notice here that it says photos contains images and videos using 70 megs of storage, that's nothing. I've got 100 gigs on my regular account. If I were to switch on Optimize Mac Storage, it would still show 100 gigs for a little while. It's going to have to upload all that stuff, synchronize things. And after a couple of days, I may notice that instead of 100 gigs, it would be 5 gigs. So it's not something like if you need space right now that you can use this technique. But if something like your drive is filling up and you want to be better about storage management, then you can turn on Optimize Mac Storage. Now, another technique you can use for photos is videos. I practiced this on my main account. I mentioned I had 100 gigs of in my photos library. That's 100 gigs of photos, no videos. Where are my videos? Well, my videos are in a separate place. I just have a folder on an external drive called videos. And every time I take a video, like I come back from a trip and I've got like 20 videos that I took on the trip, I would just pull them out of the photos library, put them in that folder, and name all the files things that make sense so I can tell what they are. And I keep them separate. Sometimes I'll organize by folder. I'll have a folder, say summer trip 2021, and put all those videos in there. But I don't keep them in the photos library just because my photos library will be like twice the size. So it's something I just decided to do, is to have my photos library be my photos library, and that's it. And it saves a lot of space. I keep my videos in an external drive. They're not in iCloud, so it's a little disadvantage. I don't get to see them on my iPhone if I'm not at my desk. But it's something you may want to consider if you're running out of space, storing your videos elsewhere to shrink your photos library in size. Let me look at some questions. Yes, there's also, as Chris pointed out, there is a separate optimize function for iCloud Drive. So this is just for Optimize Mac Storage for photos. And then there's a separate one in System Preferences under Apple ID, and then iCloud. And you've got Optimize Storage right here, and that's for your files, for optimizing your files. Let's take a look at an unusual one. I'm going to go into the Mail app. So this is a tricky one. Everything I've showed you before, and also the storage manager, all of that could all look great. You could still be pulling your hair out because a huge chunk of space is being used for you don't know what. Well, in the Mail app, there is something called the Connection Doctor. It's under Window Connection Doctor. And it's something that you use if you're having trouble with your connection and you want to figure things out. You wouldn't think this has anything to do with storage, right? Well, there's a button here called Show Logs, and next to it, Log Connection Activity. So what's this about? Well, this should be unchecked, and you should not be logging all your activity. However, for some people it is. Usually what happens is that you are talking to somebody in tech support, or you're troubleshooting something and you read something online, you turn on log connection activity, and it starts creating this little set of log files here. I turned it on previously earlier this year just to show you, they're just these little things about, every time email is fetched, every time you send an email, it just kind of logs it and helps you troubleshoot problems. So it's easy to turn this on, use it to troubleshoot a problem, and think, hey, these are tiny little files. I don't need to bother to turn it off. Maybe you don't even think about it. Well, what happens is every time you get email, it's adding more to that file and it builds up. And if you do that for a year, you've got a file that's gigabytes in size. And so many times when I've told people about this, they've been amazed to find that they've got this turned on. And when they click show logs, these files aren't 3K, they're like 3 gigs or 30 gigs. So something to check to see if you accidentally have left this on from some previous work that you've done in the Mail app and you've accumulated some huge files there. Happens much more often than I ever imagined. Yeah, and Cindy, exactly that kind of thing. I've seen that before. Lots and lots of space taken up with that. All right, so some easier things to look at. Let's hide this, get rid of this. You've got your downloads folder. So let's go into the downloads folder. It's located in your user folder to downloads. You can sometimes get to it through the dock, depending on how you have it set up. This is a big culprit. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it's going to be a place where you forget that you downloaded files. You downloaded an installer for an app and it's 4 gigs in size. And then you install the app and forget that you have the installer still in the downloads folder. The installer, by the way, is useless. Even if you think, oh, I'll keep the installer around, any decent app is going to get updates. So an installer that you downloaded 3 months ago is now obsolete. The new version would be what you get if you downloaded it now. So installers, big video files, this is where email attachments often go as well. Other apps would use the downloads folder to put things in there. And it's easy to get like download a video or a massive PDF or something. Take a look at it, do what you need to do with it. Maybe it's a video and you just want to view it once, right? And you look at it and forget that you've left it behind in the downloads folder. So take a look in the downloads folder, sort by size, see what's taking up a lot of space. And once you've done that, go through it. And if there's something in there that you want to save, then put it in its proper place. So the goal should be to have the downloads folder be empty. If you download something and you want to keep it, move it to your documents folder, move it to another folder you've created somewhere that holds that kind of file in whatever organization structure that you've created. Keep your downloads folder empty so that it's easy the next time, Friday afternoon, you decide, let me check my downloads folder. Oh, I've got a few things in here I forgot to clear out. And you could just keep your downloads folder empty. Same thing with trash. So looking in the trash folder, a lot of people accumulate lots of stuff in the trash folder. And there are a couple things you can do about that. First, if you've got a big trash folder now with lots of stuff, you can certainly sort by size and get rid of the biggest things first. You can also sort by date modified and see what's oldest and newest. You should only ever put something in the trash folder if you are 100% sure that you're going to delete it. Like you're just going to delete it. You're done with it. You don't want it anymore. I see too many people using the trash folder as a temporary storage space to say, I'm going to look later to make sure I want to delete this. You should never put anything in the trash folder unless you're absolutely sure you want to delete it. If you've practiced that, if you do that like I do, you could at any time that you want, go to the trash folder and click the empty button and get rid of it all without even looking. But if you haven't done that, then you want to go through all of the things in there now, move things you want to save to a proper place in the documents folder or wherever, until you have just things that you know you can delete, empty it, and then practice that in the future where you only put things in the trash if you are absolutely sure you want to get rid of them. Now, once you've done that, under Finder Preferences, under Advanced, there's a button here or checkbox for remove items from the trash after 30 days. Now, once you have that checked, you don't have to clean the trash out anymore. You could throw things in there, and as soon as their date has gone past 30 days, it'll automatically be deleted. So, you know, the great thing about it is you don't have to do a spring cleaning with your trash anymore. You just basically put things in the trash and it acts as a mistake buffer. If you accidentally move the wrong file to the trash, or, you know, we're 100% sure you want us to delete something, but then something happens and you realize that was a mistake and you don't want to delete it. You now have this 30-day buffer to go back and find anything that you may have deleted. But if it gets older than 30 days, it's automatically thrown away. So the trash never accumulates that much. We got to look at some questions here.
You have a question from Frank that you might want to address.
Okay, Frank, if I delete a music file from my downloads, will it also delete from my music folder? It shouldn't. There is an option that hopefully you're not using in the music app where you can go into preferences and files, and you could set things up to not copy files to the music media folder. So that means when you add something to the music app, it's actually in its original location and it's linked to in the music app. Hopefully you've got this checked, which means that every time you drag something into music, it actually makes a copy of it, stores it in the library. In that case, you can get rid of the original completely. So that answers that question.
Jim Corsica's question. That's a good one.
Which one? The
second from the bottom.
Oh yeah. I have several DMG files, most old. Yeah, they're probably installers, right? So you've got the app, you've paid for the app. So I don't know which apps these are, but typically the standard practice today is you buy an app from somebody and you have a way to log onto their site again to download the latest version. And of course, usually you don't have to do that because you just update through the app, but you don't need the original installer. Somebody above that mentioned, what if, you stopped updating your OS and you want to keep the old app installer because you may not be able to use their latest version. Most developers, when they do that, they have the old versions there. I see that all the time. You go in and it says system requirements, macOS Monterey. If you need an older version because you're running Catalina, and then they have it right there. So check on the website to see if they do that. They should do that, because if a developer is going to support, if they release their app in High Sierra and they still support High Sierra, then they just have the one download. But if they somehow cut it off and said the new version can only be run here, they almost always support the old version because they don't want to lose sales, right? If somebody has Catalina, they don't want to go and say, sorry, we can't tell you anything. They say, yeah, here's an older version, doesn't have the newest features and all that. So check. And if you do want to keep it, I would put it somewhere else. Don't put it in your downloads folder. Stick it in like on an external drive or somewhere else to keep it around. And of course, anything through the Mac App Store, there's no installer, so you're not even dealing with that. Let's see, with your cache for Adobe, I do not have any current Adobe products installed. Maybe an older version of Lightroom. Yeah, you should be able to clear out the cache with no problem at all. You should be able to look in there and it should break down the caches by app too, so you can see what's there. And if you're not using the apps, you don't have the apps installed, you don't need the caches. And if you do have the apps installed, apps shouldn't ever need their caches. They should just use them to speed things up. And the podcast app is your master setting to keep saved blessed. I don't know if there's a master setting, but you can look in the preferences there to see if that's the case. Let's go in and take a look at, I want to just show you the big thing here in this. In the storage manager again, first of all, there's one called applications. Take a look in applications. You can see which applications are using up the most space. You can sort by size. Take a look through here. Don't worry about the small ones at the bottom. But these, you can look and say, hey, I'm not using that app anymore. And there's a way to delete right there. Of course, if it's a third-party app, you may want to use their official uninstaller. But this is a quick way to find out which apps are taking up the most space. And does that, kind of mesh with what you are doing now? Is there some app that you just don't use anymore? Also, documents. This is the big one. This one should be at the top. This is like, there's so much functionality in here. Here you've got this thing where you can go through tabs. You've got large files here, so you can see your largest files. And this is really nice because it does a couple things. First, it's showing you large files both on iCloud Drive and locally. And it's also showing you things like bundles. Bundles are kind of like folders full of files, but the Finder shows you them as one thing. So you've got this Final Cut Pro bundle here. It's showing me my Final Cut Pro library, 68 gigs of space. Maybe this is something I created for a project and I don't need it anymore. And this is a great way to see that I can get rid of that. Same thing with an iMovie library. Same thing with all sorts of other types of files. You can see the large files. This is also another way to view your downloads. And it does it in a neat little way where it shows you like things in your downloads folder, older than 6 months, recent. You can sort by kind. You can sort by size. There's an unsupported apps tab. So you can find apps that are 32-bit that are left on your Mac. Here are 2 that I've left purposely just to show you. So there's something here. So this app's not going to run on this Mac. I've got macOS Monterey, of course, latest with my Mac Pro. So I could just get rid of this. You've got containers. Containers are iCloud folders that are specific to different apps. And most apps don't really use them much anymore. You can see these are empty, 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 empty. Here's one that's got some stuff in it, and it's not that much stuff. But it's useful to look through these to see what's using space. And then File Browser. And File Browser is amazing because it's doing a couple things. First, it's showing you everything in your user folder. So here is all of your folders in your user folder and the total size. But it's also showing you iCloud Drive folders. Desktop and Documents are iCloud Drive folders. For me, if I were to look in my home folder here in the Finder, and I would go up to, let's go to Home. I don't see Documents or Desktop here because they're part of iCloud Drive. I have to go to iCloud Drive, and that's where I see those. So I have to look in 2 different places. But here in the Storage Manager, it puts them together. Super handy. And I could dig down at every one of these. In my Movies folder, here's what I've got. I could dig down at each individual subfolder. And I could do the same thing in Music. It's got this all set up so I can see really easily what's taking up a lot of space. I can go through, and anything I want to get rid of, I can click Move to Trash. So I don't even have to go to the Finder now. I can control click and do Show in Finder if I want to go to it. But I can click Move to Trash if I know I just want to put it in the trash now without ever opening the Finder. So that's like a really, like, once you're done with all that other stuff, go into here. And this is where you can really dig into things and do your spring cleaning. So that basically gives you about everything you need to do. If you do want more than this, you can go into the Finder, certainly. Like here I am on my Documents folder. I can sort by size. If it's not showing me the sizes here, I could go to View, Show View Options, make sure I check Calculate All Sizes. I could sort by size, dig down inside of a folder, see what's taking up space there, or just, click here to open it up and basically go through. And it's like, it's almost the same as doing the spring cleaning of your house, right? You go closet to closet, you go look in the basement, you look in the attic, you go through things, you open up boxes, you see what's in there. You put things in the trash or the recycling bin, and you do your spring cleaning, and all the while you'll learn from it. And while you're sorting through things, one of the reasons I like to do this sometimes as opposed to this is because I can organize while I'm doing this. So if I go in here and I find a bunch of stuff, and it's like I can organize this better while I'm cleaning things out, while I'm putting things in the trash, I can do a couple things. One is I can create new folders, rename files, rename folders, sort things out better, really do the whole spirit of the spring cleaning thing, and not just throw things away or keep them, but throw things away, and the stuff I do keep, organize it better. Another way you can organize, and the last thing I want to mention, is archiving. When I talk about archiving, basically what I mean is getting an external drive, just some standard hard drive you can connect to your Mac, lots of space on it. And the idea is not to have that connected to your Mac all the time, but when you're cleaning stuff out, you connect it, you see stuff you don't need anymore, like maybe this folder is an old project, I don't need it anymore, it's taking up too much space on my drive. I'm going to move it to that external drive. I call it archive, or archive 1, or archive 2022, or whatever you want to do, and move it over there. And then when I'm done with my spring cleaning, I can disconnect the drive if I want, or leave it connected, either way. From time to time, when I'm finished with a project or I discover something I don't need anymore, I'll archive it to that drive. And that's a great way to clear off stuff. This is stuff, my criteria for archiving is things I'm pretty sure I don't need anymore, but I don't want to delete them. Like I may need to go back to them. I may need to look at my tax PDF, that my 1040 from 2007 again. So I'll put it on the archive, but probably not. I may need to look at a fun video project I did. It's an iMovie library that I did 10 years ago. But I'm probably not going to ever edit it again, but I don't want to delete it. So I move it to the archive. If I feel even the slightest bit uncomfortable deleting it permanently and forever, I move it to an archive drive. And if I run out of space on the archive drive, I buy another archive drive. And that way I could keep my internal drive on my Mac nice and clean and not cluttered up with things that I probably won't need anymore. So as I said before, a lot of the stuff I talked about and a few more suggestions are right here. I'll actually paste the URL into the chat if people want it. Let me take a look at any more questions.
I have a comment about something you said about
Yes.
archiving an iMovie.
Mhm.
One of the things that I've encountered on some of my archives is that as the OS systems change,
Mhm.
so does the availability to select some of the movie files.
Mhm.
You may actually lose the I want to say the source that allows you to see that video file. So I've actually had to take a handbrake and re-encode some of my movie files that were fine in, let's say, Catalina or Mojave before then, but my Monterey OS cannot even read these files. So as you're archiving files, you still need to be active about making sure that you can access those files in the future by sometimes saving them forward.
Yes. And yeah, like what you said, I actually had to do exactly the same thing recently because I did an iMovie project many years ago. And the result was that I made a DVD
Mm-hmm.
and I'd saved the
Yes.
DVD. I actually was smart enough to
Yes.
save the DVD digitally. So I had the disk image,
Mm-hmm.
but what I didn't do was save the actual like exported iMovie file. So I used Handbrake to get it all back.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to do it again, I don't make DVDs anymore, of course, but if I were to do it again, I would save the full video. Here's the 1 hour video as just a video file for the archive. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would have the DVD in addition to that. And
Right.
yeah, it's really handy to do that. It's probably a good idea, even if you have an iMovie library and you've got everything in there and maybe you played it from iMovie. That's how you showed it to your family with iMovie. You should still export it as like the finished final version, even if you're not going to use that right now, just in case in the future you don't have access to iMovie anymore. Like, not that iMovie is going to go anywhere, but maybe iMovie changes significantly or whatever. And instead of, you've got this final version that was exported in a standard format, in an H.264 format, which at this point, there's so much MP4 H.264 video out there that I think 100 years from now, you're going to be able to open that stuff up because there's just so much of it. So yeah, it's a good point there. Let's see here. Any other questions?
Carol is asking, what do you mean by saving it forward? Do you
By
want to
saving
take
it,
that?
let me find that one.
Carol, what that means is that, like, QuickTime, let's say you have a video that may have been saved way back when using QuickTime 7. Well, QuickTime 7 is no longer available, and if you try to open that same movie in today's QuickTime, you might not be able to. So you want to take these files and save them, pull them forward while you can with the latest version of that software. Or even try it with Handbrake. Handbrake has been really good with these video files.
So let's some of these other questions. Yeah, VLC is a good media player to use for that as well. How do you archive an entire second user? Actually, I believe when you go to if you go to delete a user, one of the options is to archive the home folder. It depends on what you want to archive from the user. If the main thing is just the files and folders, then just archiving their home folder should do all that for you. But if you want more things like settings or reminders or whatever, then it gets a little more complex. I would say that if you actually have things like reminders and settings and all that you want to keep, calendar events that maybe I wouldn't delete the user from the drive at all. Maybe archive some of the big things taking up space to make the user account really a tiny thing that doesn't bother you. But it's difficult if you want to delete an entire user. I'd have to really think about that. Think about what it is you want to save from that user account. Let's see. Yeah, I have a couple of questions about Clean My Mac and other apps like that. I don't use any of those. I don't recommend any of those. Most of what they do, either your Mac does automatically or you can do yourself. And I think it's more important to learn the skills to do those couple little things on your own. But I'm as much of a pro user as there can be. I use Xcode to develop apps. I use Final Cut Pro to create videos. I maintain websites. I do all that. I never used any maintenance or cleaning or app uninstallers at all. So you definitely don't need them. So cool. Let's see. How can you get movies you saved in iMovie Theater, which no longer support iMovie Theater? I think I don't have any to test, but I think if you create something in iMovie Theater, are they still there? Does anybody know? Has anybody run into that?
I have not.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I would look in to see if you can actually access them in iMovie as regular video projects right now. I know in the past when iMovie has removed features and you go into those projects, they're just there as regular projects. And then, they just have all the bits saved to the individual projects. So it might be the case here. Tim asks, is there a less expensive option than having lots of external drives? Yeah, using a drive dock, like you suggest, Tim is suggesting using a drive dock. I've done that in the past. Right now, it's weird. Storage is getting so cheap, it's hard to justify doing that. Like I had these 1 terabyte drives, the internal drives that I would put into a dock and then put things on. But then it got to be the point where, like, I think my current Time Machine backup drive is a 14 gigabyte drive that I bought for a little over $200. And it's kind of hard to like beat that, 14 gigs for a little over $200. I could probably beat that marginally by having these separate drives. So it all depends what you want to do. What I really like to do is get the small portable drives. They're the drives they're much smaller than the ones that you that you plug into power. You just plug them into USB on your Mac. They're tiny, but they still hold, a typical one's 4 or 5 terabytes now. And so not as good as my 14 terabyte drive, but so small that I can basically stack them in a little drawer. And I actually wouldn't need more than one right now. The only reason I have a stack is because I think I have one that had like 3/4 of a terabyte back from 10 years ago. And then I bought one that had a terabyte on it. And then I bought another one that had 2 terabytes on it, as the prices changed and storage changed. And now I've got one that's got 5 terabytes on it that I'm not even close to filling up yet. So I probably could actually pull all the stuff from those old drives onto that 5 terabyte drive and just have one. And then I really wouldn't be able to save much money over like, getting a dock with all of those big drives.
All right, Giovanni has a good question for you.
Yeah, any trick to use to find duplicate files? So, um, yeah, duplicate files is a tough one. You can go in the Finder so I'm still screen sharing here, and you could do a search. So you can, do Command F, and I'll search, either this Mac or documents, and I'll do file size is greater than, and 100 megs, and it'll show me the big files, right? Maybe I'll do 20 megs, right? And then I sort by size. Now, the interesting thing is that any duplicate files are exactly the same size. So they're going to appear right next to each other when I do this. And so if I find two files, let's say these were exactly the same files, I'd be like, oh, they're two different things. I could see, or they're exactly the same thing rather. And I could see down here that one's stored in this location, one's stored in that location. And I can make a judgment call, which one is the one I want to keep. And also learn and say, why did I end up with a duplicate file here? What did I do? Well, and maybe improve in the future. And then the idea of doing like greater than and 20 megabytes is what I need here because this is my example account. Maybe it will be 20 gigabytes or 1 gigabyte if I normally do this in my real account. And the idea being is I'm not going to worry about a duplicate file that's 10K, right? Or even 1 meg. But I do want to worry about if I've done a mistake and created a 100 megabyte or 1 gigabyte file. So this is a quick way to go and find those and deal with them not only now, but kind of moving into the future to create a better process. So let's see. Somebody's saying they use duplicate file finder and photos manager. Yeah, I don't use any of those for photos, for duplicate photos. It's harder and harder to get duplicate photos now in the Photos app, because when you go to import and you select with the import screen, it's going to go to review for import. Whether you're pulling from an SD card, from an attached device, or a bunch of files, it's going to go and say, hey, you've got some duplicates here. It really makes it hard to get duplicates now. In the past, it was easier. So hopefully, if you have duplicate photos, they're a thing of the past, and it's just a matter of going through your photos and seeing what you've got. You can definitely, go to all photos view like this. You can adjust the size here. And then any photos that are duplicates are going to be side by side because they're going to be the same time, same, that they were taken, exact same second that they were taken. So you'll be able to spot duplicates here pretty quickly. You can even like enlarge this to get it like maybe a 4x4 kind of situation or 5x5. You also have this right here. You can click there and then it's all squares, which might be a little easier. So here I've got, are these duplicate photos here? So they might be, since this is an example account, I tend to like duplicate them and make changes and do things during tutorials. So you can make a judgment call. This also will help you because a lot of us have duplicate photos that aren't duplicates. You just simply took 3 photos of the same thing, thinking that you want to get a good one. So now you come back and you might look through this. And again, your spring cleaning process might be that I've got 3 photos of the same thing. Yeah, I remember standing there and thinking when I took the first one that this wasn't a good shot. I took another one, then I decided to take a step to the left. I took a third one and I'll deal with it later. And now it's a year later and you're like, oh yeah, I've got 3 shots of this. Which one do I want to keep? Or maybe I want to keep all 3 or, whatever. So an app isn't going to find that for you because they are different photos. So yeah, And also spring cleaning, you may want to delete photos that aren't duplicates, right? The photo of your thumb, the photo of, I have lots of photos of my knee because of the way I grab my iPhone sometimes, put my iPhone down in my lap, grab it to take another photo, and I've got it all ready to take. And I end up with a photo of my knee and then the photo of what I wanted, so you can do a lot of spring cleaning besides duplicates at the same time. So let's see. Somebody else recommends Power Photos. I've never used that one. Yeah, it's important when you do spot duplicate photos to understand how they got there. It used to be under iCloud, there used to be photo stream. And a big problem people had is they turn on photo stream because that's kind of neat, but then they'd also sync their iPhone. So you get the photos coming automatically and then sync. It can still happen if you have iCloud photos turned on and on your iPhone, everything automatically goes from your iPhone to all of your devices. And then if you don't think about it, you may actually connect your iPhone and then try to import all your new photos, therefore getting two copies. However, you have to ignore the message now that says you already have these photos, when you import. So it's a little harder to do, but it is another way that people have gotten some duplicate photos. Same thing with an SD card. You put the SD card in, and then you say, yeah, import all these photos. And then it says, oh, do you want to delete them? And you're like, oh, just in case, I'll say no, keep them. Then you go and you take more photos, you put the card in again and say, import all the photos. And now you get all the ones that you imported before and your new ones. Nowadays, it will tell you these are duplicate photos. Are you sure you want to import these? But it's easy to ignore that message and then end up re-importing those old photos again. So basically that's my presentation on spring cleaning stuff. It's an exercise that is good not only to free up drive space, but also to help you get more organized and see, create better practices for yourself that you can carry into the future.
Okay. Mitch, can you unmute yourself and ask your question about the user? Mitch, are you there? Mitch.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a user account. It was my main, and it's an administrative account, and I have two administrative accounts. And I had trouble somewhere along the line last year with this primary user account. And so that's when I started moving everything to the second administrative account. And so I was just going to delete it. But then I found out that I was actually in TurboTax, which you mentioned, and I found out, oh, there were some TurboTax files that somehow I didn't capture. And so it's like I'm afraid to delete that original user account that has some kind of an error in it that Apple can't find, nobody can find, but it acts up on certain things. And so that was why I asked the question. But I think based on what you told me, what I should do is go in and just grab all those files and put them to an archive and just keep the skeleton there.
Yeah. That's always the safe thing to do, right? I've done this before where like a similar thing is, say, my wife she got a new MacBook Air. So, and she had an iMac before. And she's like, I moved everything over. I'm done. Here's my iMac. You can do whatever you want with it. And so I took the iMac and I was like, just in case, I'm just going to find a spare drive that has some space on it. And I just dragged and dropped all of her files on there. So that, everything in her home folder, which includes her photos library, which include, anything in the movies folder, all of that. And you know what? I'm 100% sure she has everything she needs, and I'll never use that backup that I just made. But now I can wipe the iMac, recycle it or resell it, and probably like in a couple of years, I'm probably going to come across that drive and look, and it'll say, iMac 2021, copies of all files in the folder there. And I'll be like, oh, it's 2025. Yeah, I don't think I need this anymore. Delete. So it doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt to do it. And, things like that TurboTax file that comes up next April. And you're like, oh, boy, I'm glad I backed those up.
Thank you, Mitch.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Marilyn, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. In a recent MacMost video, you talked about the issue of not having 20-inch displays available anymore. And you gave several solutions. And one solution I thought of for myself was to buy a MacBook and use my old 27-inch desktop for display. Is that a good option?
Well, first of all, it's probably not an option at all. I'm going to bring up the page here. So that's called target display mode. And it's right here. So this is use your iMac as a display with target display mode. Now, first of all, it only was a feature of some iMacs from 2011 to 2014. So the thing about those models, they were pre-Retina displays. In other words, you got, say, a 1920 by 1080 display. That was it, 1920 by 1080 pixels. In 2014, they introduced the Retina displays, which doubled, 4 pixels for every 1 pixel. So you had 3840 across, and everything looked sharper. Fonts look sharper, pictures look so much better, and all of that. So what you'd be doing, even if you could do it, is going to basically an old display. What would be the equivalent now to something you can get for about $100, an old style, pre-2014 display. So not a great display. So even if your iMac is one of those, there's still the problem that iMac used as a display. They must have High Sierra or older or earlier installed. And the other Mac, the new Mac, must have been introduced in 2019 or earlier and have Catalina installed, which of course a new Mac you're going to buy is not going to do it. So even if you did have an old iMac that fit the criteria, your new Mac's not going to be able to do it. And then even if all that was true, you probably don't want to do it because it's not a very good display compared to what you get now for like $250 or $300, you can get a 27-inch 4K display now. And those 4K displays are going to be a lot more energy efficient. They're going to put a lot less heat, and they're going to be a lot more compact on your desk. I'm not talking about like the screen size, obviously is 27 inches, but it's not going to be like super thick. It's not going to be this heavy thing. So there's a lot of good reasons to want a new display, even if you could. I'll put the link to this in the chat.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marilyn, for the question. All right. Okay. All right, we're open for questions. Anyone have a question? I'm looking at the list of questions before here, and most of them have been answered.
I have one more question. It's Mitch.
Go ahead, Mitch.
I'd just like to get your feeling on using a Mac with a 48-inch display. Those are becoming very popular, and I've got a buddy of mine that swears by it because he can open up several screens at one time, and they're mostly financial screens. But do you have any feelings on those?
Oh, wow. I've never seen a 48-inch display myself, so huge, like a TV.
Samsung makes several,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
actually they sell one at Costco.
I suppose if if you wanted something that big, for me, 48 inches, one of the things that I'm concerned about right away is, using my neck a lot to look at different parts of the screen. I've got a 32-inch screen right now and a 27-inch screen off to the side. And, it's like, I don't even, I've been asked before, why do I have my screen on the side vertical instead of horizontal? And one of the reasons is because if it was horizontal, then the left side of that screen would be, I'd have to look like this. This would be me looking at the left side of the screen. That's a lot of this all day long. So I'd be worried about a 48-inch screen. I guess it would be further back, so maybe it wouldn't be as bad. But then if it's further back, is it really any different than using say a 32-inch screen? I don't know. I mean, I guess I would try it out in a store first to see if that's for you to use such a large screen. I'm concerned. I'm expecting today to get my studio display. It's supposed to arrive this afternoon. I've been using a 32-inch 4K screen for a while now. Going down to a 27-inch screen is going to be interesting. I'm hoping it's not, I mean, it's going to be considerably smaller, and the pixels are going to be more dense. So, it's kind of the opposite of what you're talking about there. 48-inch screen will make it really easy to read things. And 27-inch display at 5K is going to make it more difficult for me to read things. So let's see how it goes.
Okay, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you, Mitch. Alan Weinstein, can you please ask a question?
Yeah, my question is totally unrelated to anything he talked about today. Are you
Go ahead, Alan. We'll give it to you. Go ahead.
okay?
Go ahead.
Can I combine workouts in my activities from my, I often have two different workouts that happen right next to each other and I want to combine them. Is there a way of combining workouts?
No idea. I've never tried to do it.
What do you mean combining workouts, Alan?
In other words, I have one workout that, like, say, went for 10.5 minutes, and then for some reason it ended. I don't know why, but it ended. And so I immediately started another workout that went for another a few minutes. When I really intended it to be all one workout, but for some reason, either I did it or the machine did it. It ended one workout and I restarted another one. So there's a way I can combine those two workouts.
Okay, we'll look into that. And I'll never let you ask this question again, right? All right. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I think the
Okay.
answer. I think the answer is yes.
We'll find out, Alan, and get back to you.
All right, great.
Okay, all right, thank you.
On my mind for a long time.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. All right, I want to say to everyone, please save your chat. There are a lot of interesting questions and answers in the chat that you might find useful. And with that, Carol, can you ask your question? You're the last question of the day.
Yes, I had space used up when it shouldn't have been. And talking to Apple, they found this enormous other. And some of it seemed to be time machine backups that were backing up and holding on the hard drive because nothing was attached externally. Does that sound even sensible to you, Gary?
Yes, it's called local snapshots. And so the idea is that you have your time machine drive normally attached and it's making backups. Then the time machine drive goes away. Say it's a MacBook and you're traveling, right? So you don't have your time machine drive with you. What it's going to do is it's going to use empty space on your drive to do those backups anyway. And it'll only use empty space for this, right? So depending upon how you look at your Mac's drive space, that may show up as empty, or if you are taking a look using a utility or something, it may show up as being used by something. Then when you reconnect the time machine drive, it takes those backups and moves them to the time machine drive. So the idea is to not be without your time machine drive for that long. Like if you use your MacBook while you work during the day, plug your time machine drive in at night, and all those local snapshots should get offloaded onto time machine and all of that. But the thing about snapshots is they only use empty space. So a lot of people will have, say, a 1 terabyte drive. They have 300 gigs of stuff. Why is 700 gigs being used? Well, 700 gigs is being used because you're not using it for anything else. So your Mac's going to do something useful with it and do a backup so that when you do realize that, oh no, I made a mistake, I want to revert to the file from yesterday, you actually can do it with Time Machine, even though you hadn't connected your Time Machine drive in. If you regularly connect your Time Machine drive, like if you can't have it connected all the time, but you connect it every night, then you won't have local snapshots be a problem.
All right. Great. Thank you for that question, Carol. All right, with that, it is time to end our meeting. Gary, I want to thank you very much. And again, I advise everyone to please copy the chat. And George, all yours.